Welcome everyone, it's Kelly with Wf1's, and I am so excited today to be speaking with the great Panache Desai. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, it's great to be
here.
here.
I'm really excited to be speaking with you today. For those of you who don't know Panache, he is first and foremost a visionary, I personally believe, for all of human consciousness and humankind. Secondly, and not secondly actually, he is a father, which I really respect more than anything because I'm a mom and I think it's one of the greatest teachings of our lives to be parents to children. And he's now recently an author and a teacher to many with this book, Discovering Your Soul Signature, a 33-day path to purpose, passion, and joy. And I've read a lot of books, as a lot of you know, many books for 25 years. And I would have to say this is absolutely one of my all-time favorite books, Panache. It spoke to me because of the alignment of authenticity and really because you're completely transparent on who you are. And many of us in this world are searching for that, and that is what our mission at Wf1's is to have women and men step into their power, their true authentic power, and live the life that they've always dreamed of.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So can you start with what is a soul signature and how do you define that? I'd love to start with that for the book.
Our soul signature is like our spiritual DNA. It's who we are at our most authentic core.
Okay.
And so it's our true essence. It's our authentic self. And what I've discovered is that people who are living in alignment with that have a life that works. It's like the quality of our life is determined by the clarity and consistency of our connection. And so this soul signature piece is probably one of the most important pieces for any human being to discover. Because in the absence of that, we suffer. We try and fill this void that we believe that we have. We buy into the judgments and the limitations. And so discovering your soul signature really is just a progression out of fear into love, a progression out of judgment into acceptance.
It's so beautiful, and those concepts seem so, for people that are living daily life sometimes, they're hard to step into daily. So, I want everyone to see this book that I was sent at first. I got a nicer one so you could see the actual cover, but the book is a 33-day exercise, which I know you are on the website right now, you're walking people through that, which is amazing. But it has such practical guidance for 3 times a day in it that I did it all at once and now I'm doing it again and imbibing it in a different way. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to do that and why that's so important?
Well, I wanted people to have something that was practical and accessible. I know how busy we all are. And so I just thought to myself, how nice would it be if we could do something, if we could just read for 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon, and 5 minutes in the evening, and we had something that we could apply, in our lives. Right. And so the morning is the cultivation of a new awareness or a new insight. It's a new way of looking at yourself, stepping you out of judgment into acceptance. And then the afternoon, because I was always very skeptical as a child, was, I always want to experience it myself, and I always want people to experience things for themselves. And so I want them to then apply these principles in their lives. And so the afternoon then gives them an opportunity to do exactly that, to prove to themselves that what they are reading actually works when applied.
Absolutely.
And then in the evening, there's a beautiful lullaby, or almost like a guided meditation that people fall asleep to. And that's cool because what we do 20 minutes before we go to bed stays with us throughout the night. And so I thought, how nice to come to this book and to be able to just read something that is soothing and nurturing, that's going to allow us, to be peaceful and calm and to transition into sleep.
Right. I love that you say that, and I'm thinking about the people that watch this and they go, oh, there's a lot of self-help books out there that teach this. And I will say what I find is unique in it is that you use such practical examples. And I feel like the beauty is, and the perfection of it is the simplicity. It really reminded me a lot of the 4 Agreements in some way, that Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 Agreements, because it's a little longer, but it's simple, and you can grasp it, but you're not pushing all this information into your head to assimilate every day. You're just, and it's action oriented, and that's what I loved about it the most, the action around it. So I wanted to ask you about that piece, about the fact that in our world and individually, being able to be empowered to make choices that are different, to step into that soul signature.
Well, I've discovered myself that, the most profound things that we do are really the simplest things. And that the truth really is very simple, and that we can come back to that simplicity, we can start to access something deeply transcendent within us. And so for me, it was not about giving people more information and more concepts. I think if anything, we already know too much. But it's just about giving people, a new awareness and a new insight, so that they can start to nurture and love themselves where they're at. And so it really is a practical how-to guide that people can apply every single day, regardless of who they are, how they were raised, where they live. It's an opportunity for them to really go on this journey of self-discovery, probably the most important journey of all.
And I find that that's my, you talked about how you found your soul signature in the book at the beginning when you were young, after you went through some times that all of us kind of go through in our 20s at some point. And I find my soul signature in my life is this just yearning to grow and understand, but it can be anything, right?
Yeah.
Your soul signature?
Yeah, when we're aligned with our spirit and our soul, it's like whatever we do all of a sudden takes off. And then it becomes like the greatest contribution ever. And that doesn't matter if you're a janitor, if you're the CEO of a corporation, or you're just at home taking care of your kids. Ultimately, we all want to be at peace with ourselves.
Right.
And we all want to, be a contribution, be a difference in this world. And what I've discovered is that our willingness to embrace who we are allows us to be at peace with ourselves. We're less reactive, we're more spacious, and then we can be present for other people. And we can then really be available for others in a way that we couldn't before.
Our willingness to embrace ourselves, I love that, because it's really true. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
But I'm 45 and I'm just stepping into that place, and it takes, because we overcomplicate. Is that what you were saying?
We do, because we buy into society's societal norms and other people's judgments and expectations. And so where it's simple when we embrace who we are, it becomes very complicated when we start to live up to everyone else's version of who we're supposed to be. You see, and that's also when we suffer, because we've moved away from our design. We've moved away from just being available in every moment to experience whatever's going on inside of us. And so this is really a journey back to ourselves, to be who we are and to meet ourselves with the same love and kindness that we extend to everyone around us every day.
That's beautiful. And speaking of the term authenticity, it's quite a buzz term, but it's also at Wf1's, we're all about authenticity and inspiration. I find that the inspiration part and that taking action in your life is just as important as after you found out who you are. And it's a vehicle, right, to finding out who you are. I want to go over a couple of quotes in Panache's book because they're just so beautiful. One, you said, humility equals authenticity, on the chapter about humility, and I love that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We're so quick to own all the parts of ourselves that we deem to be wrong or bad, but very rarely will we own our skills and our strengths. And for me, humility is just honesty. It's about being honest about every part of who we are. If you're good at something, own the fact that you're good at that. Where you still have to, where you are still not fully embracing of who you are, own that. See, then we don't have to engage in these behaviors where we compensate for our perceived inadequacies. Right? We can just be honest and transparent and say, you know what, I'm here, I'm enough, and that's all.
So it's congruence with who you are.
Yes. Authenticity really is the alignment of our personality with our soul.
Right. Gary Zukav said that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It really is like what is inside with what you're doing on the outside.
That's right.
Absolutely. And then I love this in the gratitude chapter. You talk about cultivating gratitude allows us to be authentically transparent. The authenticity paves the way for us to be grateful. And the thing I liked the most was the get your gratitude on. And that's the contemporary part of you that I just love, because I have they call themselves my friends, mainstream friends, and people in the business sector that are like, I'm not on my spiritual path. I don't need any help. But then they're like, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I'm not happy in my life. And so what I love about what you talk about in this book, first of all, with Get Your Gratitude On, is you can take anything you're doing in your life and you don't have to be on a spiritual path. You're like you say, your life is your spiritual path.
Yeah. For me, being human is the greatest blessing of all. And I think that's the part that we overlook. Like, everyone's in a hurry to become divine. Well, why can't we just be human? For me, this is a 33-day guide through our humanity. And we get to meet ourselves with absolute spaciousness and kindness. You know, the great analogy is, you know, if you've ever been on a playground and you've seen, you know, two sets of mothers and two sets of kids, you know, and one of these kids falls over and bangs her head, goes running up to their mother, and the mother says, "Why are you crying? I didn't raise you to be weak and pathetic. You're embarrassing me." Well, that kid's traumatized, you know, goes off and just keeps crying, never gets over it. But if we could, and then there's another type of mother that gets down on her knees and says, "Oh, where are you hurt? Let me kiss it better. Let me meet you where you're at." You know, and every single one of us is that mother. And in any moment, we're either meeting ourselves with love and tenderness and acceptance, or we're berating ourselves for something that we can't even be. We're all doing the best that we can. And when we can actually just meet ourselves in how we're showing up in every moment, completion happens, acceptance happens, love happens, spaciousness happens, peace happens.
I have so many questions because you just sparked so many things in me when you said that, and I feel it in my heart when you talk. The one I want to talk about a little bit is that darkness, that lower self area that you're talking about embracing and not judging. What are your feelings on that? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that are really all about the light and stepping into that place of just love, and it's like, well, if we don't look at that other part of ourselves and stop judging and embrace it, it's not going to go away. No,
and you know what, that whole just love and light conversation is completely unsustainable. It's like you have to have a look at who you are and own who you are in your entirety. It's like only then are you free. You know, a journalist once asked me to define liberation, and I just said liberation is the acceptance of who we are as we are. That's it, in our totality. Not
no judgment, no shame.
That's it, because there isn't any. You know, and for me, all of this was born of a direct experience that I had of the divine, because I was very skeptical. And so I literally just got to a point where in my life I'd been told I was a messenger, I was here to do something, and I was just like, yeah, right, leave me alone. You know, it's like every guru that we'd go and see on the weekends, because when you're Indian, you go see gurus and you watch Bollywood movies, right? Like every guru that we go see, we've been waiting for you, have our blessing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And all these weird things were happening around me. And I just got to a point in my life where it was too painful for me not to be myself. And I just remember sitting on the sofa just like this, and I screamed out and I said, you know what? If the divine is real, because I was pretty much an atheist up until this point.
Okay.
Because I couldn't reconcile the version of God that I was being sold. I couldn't. You know, God wrathful, and like that wasn't it for me. So I was undecided. So I'm sitting on the sofa and I'm screaming out, I'm like, all right, if you're real, then I have to experience who or what you are. Otherwise, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to look at people in their eyes and tell them that they're divine. That's not going to be me.
And what happened?
I had the experience. And it was just this infinite ocean of energy. And there was no beginning and no end. There was no judgment, there was no checklist. I couldn't be any other way than I was. And I was fully embraced for who I was. And from in that moment, it's like my whole life made sense to me. Everything that was happening, all of these incredible beings that had given me their blessing, you know, it all made sense to me. And at that point, I had to accept my soul signature. I couldn't deny who I was anymore.
Right,
and so then, and so then this message was born. And this greater recognition of this wonderful energy that's flowing through me I became consciously aware of it and accepting of it. And then from that moment on, it's like everything just took off.
So you allowed for it.
Yeah.
To be the channel and let it unfold.
Exactly.
From that place.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I hope that all of us can do that in some way or another in our lives. I set my intent to do that with the movement that's kind of come through me. I mean, I sat down in meditation and heard the words "Women for One" and got the URL. I mean, it wasn't. I just wanted to write.
Right.
And kind of talk about my experiences.
Yeah.
And the yearning just kept coming, and I kept hearing it. So I just followed the energy. And it's really great to be able to do that.
It is.
Because I remember years ago when I was having little babies and Oprah was saying, find your passion. And it's like, gosh, I wish I could find my passion. Yeah. That place where you just feel lost.
Yeah.
So are you feeling like this book will allow people to find their passion?
Absolutely. I think that this book is going to serve like a soothing balm in people's lives. Because judgment's just, you know, taken over. And people are just riddled with these judgments and expectations. And so when people find this book, it's going to be like a soothing balm. You know, and I already know that because people are going through this journey with me. And the comments that they're writing are just blowing my mind. It's like the level of transparency and vulnerability in their sharing is just beautiful. And it lets people know that they're not alone. Hey, you know what? We all get angry. We all get sad. You know, we all judge ourselves. You know, we all have these distractive or addictive behaviors, you know, that we don't talk about. We all have something that we're ashamed of. You know, we all feel guilt. And that isn't the problem. It's time to now shift the collective narrative around being human, from one of judgment into acceptance, and to recognize that all of this is serving a purpose. You see, our life really is the excuse through which the divine gets to love its creation. That's all it is.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's the sole reason why we're here.
We're all here.
Is so that this entity, this infinite being that made us, gets to express itself uniquely through us in this world.
And we're also unique.
That's right. But it's embracing our uniqueness that allows for the freedom. It's like when we try and fit in and conform, conformity's death. That's like the worst thing you can ever do, right? So when you conform and you try and fit in, you suffer. But it takes no effort for you to be yourself at all. That's why people go to bed exhausted, because they're trying so hard to be everything other than themselves.
Yes. Yeah, I had the same thing. Woke up one day and I heard that song from the Talking Heads. This is not my beautiful house. I mean, there was this place in me that felt that way. Like, this is not aligned with my true purpose.
Right.
And I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I was so unhappy.
Yeah.
And until you can embrace that, it's quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So you talked about the collective consciousness, which is perfect, because the next quote I have to ask you about is, I believe we are at a point now when we are finally going to get it. Not just hear it, but get it and live it. We have reached in a global sense the pinnacle of separation and excess. Now we have no choice but to awaken and go within. And I was like, oh, so true. And we at Women4One have a huge following in the Middle East. And we have women from all over the world sharing their stories with no shame. And I mean, I'm sure they have shame, but they're being courageous enough to share their stories.
Yeah.
So my question is about, if you could give our community some insight on how to pursue getting into that peace and truth in the middle of such political oppression in this world in a lot of ways, and things that women and children are enduring right now. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do have a lot. I have a lot of thoughts on that. But I think that the main thing is that the oppression that we're experiencing outside of us is really a byproduct of the oppression that we're putting upon ourselves in every moment. And what I've discovered is that, if we could really start loving and accepting who we are, it's like war and famine and suffering and all these things, every form of oppression, repression, suppression would actually end. Because we wouldn't need external forms of that anymore. We'd start to get to a place where really love would be the dominant energy instead of fear and separation. We'd also get beyond this false notion of scarcity. We'd begin to realize that actually if we work together, we'd get ahead much faster. And so we're really at a tipping point. And I think people are realizing now more and more that, all of these old ways of being, competing, dominating, manipulating, right? All of this stuff that people do is unsustainable. And that we have to turn within. It's like we've been living our lives from the outside in instead of the inside out. And now it's time for us all to start living from the inside out and realizing that everything that we truly want is within us. And that's just not a nice saying. That is the truth. At our core, it is all there. And the more we can embrace and accept who we are, the more we can access that which has always been there.
And as we spoke before, I love that you don't come from the place of a broken mentality. Like we've been working this far to get where we are now so that we can turn back in. Do you believe that?
Well, I can't see any brokenness.
Right.
I believe that any and all forms of brokenness that we see is just an absolute misperception that's a creation of our own minds.
That urgency, like we have to fix.
That's right. That's right. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. In most transformational models, all that's happening is an ego is trying to fix an ego. Incompletion is trying to bring completion to incompletion. It doesn't work. You have to meet yourself with loving tenderness. Only then does something shift in your life.
And so, obviously, it starts with you.
Yes.
The one.
Yes.
And so anyone, I have a team member in Cairo, a 24-year-old, beautifully powerful woman, that she's like, yeah, I mean, there was a man killed outside for protesting, a friend of mine yesterday, and there's this she's in the midst of all of this turmoil as we would see it, but yet she's at peace.
That's right.
And she's not afraid to email me, and she's
right.
careful, she has discernment, but she's very peaceful. So
the more we can be at peace in the midst of all of these things, the faster they'll end. I believe that if we could actually embrace who we are within 3 generations, all of this suffering that we see in the world would end. I know it.
That's a great statement.
That's what's happening. You know, people around the world, numbering in the millions, are remembering who they are coming back to their authentic selves, are going beyond all of the judgments and all of these expectations and rules and regulations that we're told we have to live by. And they're actually just loving themselves. And in doing that, it's now beginning to vibrate out and ripple out to everyone else, to where now other people are remembering. And it has nothing to do with religion, it has nothing to do with ideology, it has nothing to do with even being spiritual.
Or politics, right?
Exactly. It's a collective happening. It's a collective awakening, a collective remembrance that we're all a part of. And that through our willingness to be ourselves, we're bringing into being right now. We're birthing it right now.
Wow, that is exciting.
Yes.
That's very exciting.
It is. It is. Because ultimately, the other cool thing is that, you know, it's love that brings us all together. You know, how is it that this woman in Kuwait connected with you? You know,
right.
Because you've loved each other before. And then that love's like a homing beacon. And as much as that's true for her, that's true with everyone in your community. That when there's a bond of love that's created between two human beings, it's never forgotten. And that's why on a planet of 7.2 billion people, we all find each other.
Right.
That's how. But now we're all coming together in larger and larger numbers because it's time now for everyone to work together to start shifting everything, but from the inside out.
From the inside out, I love that. So, why 33 days? I was like curious about that from day one.
Well, the first thing is that none of us ended up where we are overnight, so it's definitely a progression. I love threes. It's one of my favorite numbers, especially 33. For me, that's such a significant number. And so taking people on a 33-day journey and meeting them 3 times each day was so powerful for me. You know, because in most traditions and cultures, there's a trinity. You know, it's like mind, body, spirit, you know,
right.
God, guru, self, right? And
right.
they all have this trinity. 3 is a very powerful, sacred number. And so I thought, why not 33? Like, it's my favorite number. I get to, you know, meet everyone in this book 3 times a day, you know, through the words on the page, you know, and 33 days just felt natural to me.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's because when I read it all at once, and now I'm doing it daily as well.
Yeah.
My friends are like, is it one of those books you can pick up? I said, yes, but even if you sit down and read this, like I did, I sat down and I read this all at once, it flowed.
Yes.
And that's what I loved, because you're like, oh, fear. And I love the different subjects that you address, because it's everything we address in our lives.
And it's actually a progression when you look at it, and when you look at the chapters, it's actually a progression out of our perceived darkness into our inherent light.
Yes, I noticed that.
That's what it is. Like, you start with fear
and end with
sadness
love, right?
and anger, and we end with love, right? So it's actually transformation in its essence in a book, you know, in the form of this book. So
it's like the Alchemist with that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is something that you personally, Panache, do other than the meditation daily, and you wrote this book with incredible tools in it, that you do as a father, as a husband, every day of your life to bring peace and simplicity and joy?
You know, I change diapers, I take out the trash, and I clean the cat litter. And that for me is my practice, because for me often we create this distinction between spiritual practice and life, and for me there's no distinction. You know, resting in the awareness of your breath transforms your life into a living meditation. And so what I've discovered is that if I'm resting in the awareness of my breath, whatever I'm doing becomes sacred, because I'm fully available and present for it. And in any given moment, that can look like chopping the vegetables to help my mum make her dal that she's going to make for dinner, right? Or, you know, running an errand, or taking the car to the car wash, right? Or just simply being there with my daughters. You know, it's really powerful. So just rest in the awareness of your breath in the midst of, you know, what you consider to be your mundane activities. And you'll begin to see that it's all sacred. Because when you do something from a place of connection, it becomes sacred.
The first thing I thought of when you talked about that is when you get frustrated with your children, or you're standing in a line and you feel that impatience, that breath can help as well.
Yeah.
And just the frustration of life, how do you...
Well, in the frustration of life, it's like we tense, right? And our breathing becomes really shallow. And then we cut off the flow. So what I've discovered is that if we can just stop and slow down and breathe, naturally come back to a place of centeredness, and then it's like everything just kind of works itself out, you know, in a way that you could never imagine. And so it's the path of least resistance, really, is what it is. It's just, you know, whatever's happening is happening. It's all arising and subsiding spontaneously, and I'm here just to observe it. Because really that's the highest form of spiritual practice there is to observe life without judgment. To observe oneself and life without judgment is the highest form of spiritual practice there is.
And that truly just, if you come into that observer, it brings you into the present moment.
That's it. Because you don't breathe in the past.
Nope.
And you don't breathe in the future. And so resting in the awareness of what's happening in every moment is freedom. The other cool thing is that the word for God and the word for breath is one and the same in most traditions. They use the same word. So for me, it was like, you know, yeah, and I grew up around all these gurus, so I'm like, okay, well, here's the interesting thing. So all these gurus give you all these mantras, and you're supposed to breathe using the mantra. And so I'm like, is it the mantra that's making the difference, or is it actually just the fact that I'm aware of the fact that I'm breathing?
Right.
And for me, I actually got to the point where the mantra was just for the mind, but actually it's just the fact that I'm aware of the fact that I'm breathing that's making the difference.
Right. That's great. And you love the breath, and I know you love music.
Yes.
And I know I had a dear friend that went to see you in Arizona recently.
Oh, cool.
And she had never seen you. And so she said, the first thing I noticed was I had superiority, like, who is this guy going to tell me things? And then it was so beautiful and simple. And he used music.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about the music?
I love music. You know, music for me is so cool. You know, growing up in London, I was involved in the music scene, and music was the great unifier. Like, it brought people of different races and backgrounds and nationalities together in a collective experience. And music has the power to do that. And so I love using music because it's a huge heart opener, you know. And also I always shake things up. Like, I'm a real proponent of moving meditation. You know, people just not sitting there and just being passive. Say, no, get up, shake what the divine gave you. Let's get into it, right? Clap your hands. Let's get in the energy of this, right? So for me, I'm a big proponent of dynamic meditation, where people are actually moving and they're engaging in it. Because we're here to move. We've been designed to move.
We're here to be on this earth.
Exactly.
Not, woo, yeah.
Exactly. And so I love music. You know, my workshops turn into raves. You know, people are literally like raving in the middle.
She was loving it. Yeah.
Glow sticks, the whole thing. You know, because that's what it's about. It's about celebrating. Yes. You know, it's about being in the energy. You know, being in that presence.
And what I love about you is there's no model or prototype of Panache. No. You are who you are.
Yeah.
You're that unique expression. So with that, I always ask everyone that I speak to, and I feel so honored to be speaking to such incredible people that have such wisdom. What one piece of wisdom you would share with our community if you had one thing to say, or a couple sentences to say, what would you share?
That you're not broken, that you don't need healing, that you don't need fixing. That at the deepest core of who you are is a love that is beyond description. And that my deepest wish is that you take the time to just disconnect from your daily activities and just be still, to begin to get in touch with that energy, because it's there. You know, you can turn yourself inside out, your whole life for other people, and you can show up in ways that you believe you need to show up in order to be loved by them. Or you can stop and recognize that that's an absolute insanity and just turn within and access that which was always inside of you. Love, health, abundance.
And I feel that in my heart. I'm crying because the words "you're not broken" are so huge for our society.
Right.
You're not broken. And
right.
I wanted to share, I'm getting some testimonials for my site, and I have to acknowledge that part of me where someone would say something wonderful, it was almost more difficult to hear.
Yes.
It's that place in all of us that I didn't want to open the email, like, oh, what are they going to say? Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. I had an experience. I was in a church in Chicago, and I just did a talk. And this woman came up to the end of the talk and she said, I want you to know, before I came here I was on the verge of committing suicide. And she looks at me in my eyes and she says, I want you to know now that I once again have a sense of hope for myself and my life. And I had such a level of unworthiness in me that I couldn't receive what she had just said to me. It bounced off. It just bounced off me, like I couldn't receive it. And now looking back at it, it's like, I can finally now let that in. I can
brings you to tears when
yes,
it does.
because there's a part of us that believes that who are we? You know, what qualifies us? You know, if you knew who I really was, then you wouldn't love me. And now I'm just like, we're all the same. And you know what? We're all here to remind each other. And that ultimately, that compliment or that acknowledgement is them recognizing a part of themselves in you. And so by not receiving it, you're doing them and yourself a disservice.
Really opening that place.
Yes.
To allowing it to come in.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that wow, I couldn't receive that.
Right.
You know, and that's what I love about this book. It takes you through that. Like, what can't you receive? Look at these things. Just the awareness.
Yes.
And I noticed that, to go back to the book, you had a theme where it was like awareness, and then the end was action. It was like notice, practice, okay, solidify.
Integrate,
integrate.
Yeah.
It was this theme all the way through it, and it's just so beautifully simple in the threes, right? So thank you for that wisdom. That was amazing. So how can our community find your book?
Well, you can get it through my website, which is panachedesai.com, which is PANACHEDESAI.com. Or you can get it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you know, any good bookstore. It's in every Barnes & Noble around the US, so just pop in your local bookstore and go grab it.
Well, and I encourage everyone, I love having the book so that you can write in it. And I mean, the notes I've taken, the things I've folded down, and to go back to it, it's kind of like the 4 agreements for me. I just keep going back to it already. So I'm so honored to have spoken with you. And thank you for all of the service that you do for humanity in the world.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Incredible being here with you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful and beautiful day.